Today's daf we're going to be learning is about Zarah daf lamed bet. A few announcements. I'll be heading to America at the end of this week, so I'll be speaking in two places now, also in California and also in Long Island. So anybody who wants to come in New York, we'll be sending out details. We'll try to get the details out to those who are in those areas. If you don't receive any message about it, then please contact us and we'll give you the information needed. And if you know people, if you don't live there, but you know people who might want to come, in New York, it'll actually be a shiur with chavruta and shiur, which will be a nice opportunity to also learn with chavruta. And in California, it'll be a lecture. So I'm looking forward to meeting learners there and seeing people. So you're all invited if it's convenient for you. And the second thing is that the registration for the bookmarks has gone up. So it's open. You can register. You can get your bookmarks. And again, they won't be sent out for a while. We're just getting the orders so we know how much to print and all that. But you will be getting them. Hopefully, I know the mail system's not amazing, but hopefully you will get it before we start Seder Kodesh. And still sponsorship opportunities available. So if you would like to sponsor $500 or 1,700 shekel, 1,700 shekels, or whatever it is in your currency. So we're inviting sponsors. We have a few, but still looking for a few more. With that, we will get started. Okay, we're learning about, we finished with this topic, or we were in the topic of beer and other issues related to beer. So now we're going to talk about vinegar made from beer. And Rav Yosef is going to say, I'm Rav Yosef, end of Lamed Aleph Amabet, Hai Chala de Shichra Daramai Asul. The vinegar made from beer of an Aramean, which means basically a Gentile idol worshiper. Why is it forbidden? Again, forbidden means forbidden in general to drink and to benefit from. Because they mix in it, the way they make the vinegar is they mix in wine yeast. Okay, where yeast made from wine, and therefore it has wine in it. Rav Ashi may oats are shari, but wait, if you had vinegar that they were putting away for storage purposes for the long term, if you mix in the yeast from the wine, it actually is going to make it spoil quicker. And the whole idea of the otsar is to keep it for a long time. And therefore, so it really depends. If you're buying the vinegar that was kind of made and for immediate use, it'll be an issue. There's a concern that there's wine yeast mix in there, but not if it's put away for storage. Okay, now we get back to this Cheres Hadriani. We're going to understand it a little bit better. The Gemara wants to know my Hadriani. So let's go back to the Mishnah for a quick minute. Okay, it said there the Cheres Hadriani, right there we just learned, and it wrote Lebuvim. They're also forbidden, and they're in this list of not only can you not drink anything made from them, but also you can't benefit from them. So what is this Cheres Hadriani? We explained it very minimally when we learned the Mishnah. Now we're going to explain it more in detail. And if you want even more detail with even some more different opinions, you can read Flashback this past week, which really went into different issues about what is this Cheres Hadriani, what are these earthenware shards that we're going to be talking about. Okay, my Hadriani. So Hadriani is Hadrian, and he was the Roman emperor that conquered, that basically put down the Bar Kokhba rebellion. And you can read more about that also in Shuli's article. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Cheres shel Hadrianus Kesar, right? So it says, what is Hadriani? They say it's the Rabbi Yehuda, and the name of Shmuel. It's the Cheres of Hadrianus Kesar. Okay, so what does that mean? It was his Cheres. Well, Rav Dimi comes and explains. Ki ata Rav Dimi Amar, he explained. The way it would work is like this. Karka betula hayta shelo avada. They would take land that was never, soil that was never ever used. Avodah vinata, they would plant it. They would work the land and plant it, and they would plant a vineyard, grow grapes. Okay, we get very quickly to, and then they have wine, and they would take the wine that they made from there into these white vessels, these white jugs, and they would leave the wine in there to soak for a long time. Now, why white? It seems that the white would absorb a lot more wine. It's made of a substance that could absorb a lot of wine, and they would be fully soaked in wine, the earthenware vessels. And then they would break it up into shards, and they would take the shards with them wherever they would go. And then, when they would get to a place, and the assumption here, assuming It truly actually said that these were two explanations. One is the Cheres of Hadrianus Caesar, and the second is that Rav Dimi's explanation. But I read it more as this is describing what is the Hadrian's earthenware. It was this. Because, and then the commentaries say he probably had his people take this to war with them, as we described when we learned the Mishnah. So then what would they do? Wherever they would go, taru lahu, which is sharu lahu, which means they would soak it, vishatu. So they would take the shards, they would put them in whatever they were drinking, right? I like that, the crystal light packets, exactly, right? So they would put it in the water, and then they would end up with wine. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, v'rishon shelanu kishlishi shelahem. So basically, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says our best wine is like their third time of putting water putting the shards in the water. It was such good wine, right, that even the third round is better than our best wine. Okay, because again, they would take it from the best vineyards. I assume that over time, people didn't necessarily make these. This was Hadrian's with the best of the best. It could be that other people later made it with any wine, but basically the idea was you had to take something, and we're going to see this later also, that absorbs a lot of wine. And maybe they would leave it for much longer, right? And leave it specifically to really absorb so that when they would soak it in water, wine would come out. Now they ask a question, which is, so what we said until now is they're isuran, right? They're forbidden to drink and forbidden to benefit. What does it mean forbidden to benefit? Well, you can't sell these shards to someone or sell the wine from the shards or, get any benefit from the wine from the Okay, so what exactly can you not benefit from? And that's really the question. So while we understand you can't benefit from the wine that's going to come from here, like let's say you took the shards, you put in water, you now have wine, you can't go selling that. But make a lemonade stand or going back to the crystal light packets, right? No making stands and trying to sell that and making money off of it. But what if you want, in the end, it's just a shard. It might have wine soaked in it, but a shard could be useful in other ways. Now, usually we think earthenware shards, we just throw them out. In those days, they used it for all sorts of things. So for example, you can use it to support the bed. So the bed had these, posts, and you could put it underneath. I was thinking, you ever go to, like it often happens in restaurants where you sit down and the table's rickety, and then they put something underneath the table to make it even. So for whatever reason, you need something to go under right, whether it's to make it even or just to support them. So now can you benefit from these shards if you're not benefiting for the wine aspect of it? You're just benefiting from it as a shard. Now here they categorize it. Right? Often the Gemara just brings examples and they don't even tell you what's the exact category here. They tell you what it's called. This is called, you want it to exist, and use it for something else completely, not having anything to do with the wine. Is this shari or asul? Is it permitted or forbidden? Tashma, let's learn from here. De Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yochanan, Chadasar v'chad shari. Well, it's told that there's machlokah between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yochanan, two Amoraim from Israel, whether it's permitted or forbidden. We don't know who permits, we don't know who forbids, but in parentheses it appears here, which means probably it was added by somebody later, wasn't in the original text of the Gemara, Hilchat HaKamanda Asar, and actually we pass like the one who forbids. Okay, so right now they're saying there's a debate, forbid or permit, okay, whether or not we paskin, okay, but put that on the side. Somebody at some point said we paskin like the one who forbids. But the Gemara is going to deal right now with the one who permits, and they're going to bring a contradiction from a braita. What we're going to do in this next section is two things. First, we're going to bring a contradiction from a braita, which really has two parts to it. And the second part is what's more relevant to us. And they're going to resolve the contradiction. Then, once we have this braita that we quoted, we're going to bring a different contradictory braita to actually the first part of the braita, and then bring these two contradictory braitot up against each other and resolve them in two different ways. Okay, but that's going to be an aside we're going to get to because we quoted the braita. But first, we're quoting the braita as a meitive, as a difficulty on the one who permits. Hadardurin v'harukbaot. Okay, these are different types of jugs that they would store wine in. Shelovdei kochavim, that belong to Gentiles, idol-worshipping Gentiles. Yayin shel Yisrael kanus behem, if you have wine of a Jew in them. Asur b'shtiya mutar b'hana'ah. So these are regular. These aren't the Hadrianus ones. These are regular jugs. And if you remember in the Mishnah, it talked about the Hadrianus, but it also talked about it said later on in the Mishnah, no dodo de kochavim mekankenehem, right? Their wineskins or their jugs, and yin shel Yisrael kanus behem. Asulim v'isuran isurana ad Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir said you can't even benefit from them, but the rabbi said you can. The assumption here is that they don't absorb as much, and either that if someone either we don't think the wine's going to come out, or even if the taste of the wine of the Gentile comes out into the wine, it's batel, right? It's not significant. That's the rabbi's opinion. Rabbi Meir forbids. Now, drinking, they weren't willing to go that far, but for benefiting, they said it's okay. Rabbi Meir didn't permit anything at all, but right now, this braita clearly holds by the rabbis that you can't drink wine because maybe there's a little taste of the wine of the yein nesach that's in there, but we're not going to be so strict as to forbid it to benefit. He'id Shimon ben Guda. I'll just mention to you if you're listening and not reading. Guda is spelled Gimel Dalet Vav. Gimel Vav Dalet Aleph with an Aleph at the end. You'll see why I'm telling you this later. He Shimon ben Guda lefnei beno shel Rabban Gamliel. He testified in front of the son of Rabban Gamliel, al Rabban Gamliel. So he testifies before Rabban Gamliel's son about something he saw Rabban Gamliel do. Sheshata mimenu ba'ako. Now he testifies that I saw your father. And he was obviously testifying in front of other people as well. I saw him drink from a jug like this in Akko. So forget about the fact that the braita says it's forbidden to drink from, but you can benefit. Your father went even farther and he even drank from it, okay? Because he wasn't concerned. Again, you could say, if you say the whole thing is batel, the amount of taste in this of the yein nesach in the wine is minimal. Or maybe he didn't think that it comes out of the jug, or maybe it gets absorbed in, okay? He was lenient. But they comment here in the braita v'lo hodulo. The rabbis didn't agree with him, okay? They didn't agree with this testimony of Shimon ben Guda, not Rabban Gamliel. They didn't agree with Shimon ben Guda, who said Rabban Gamliel did this. They said, no way, no how did Rabban Gamliel drink this wine. And they just didn't agree with him. We haven't yet gotten to the point of our braita, why we quoted this. I'll just remind you. We want to know about using the earthenware shards from the Hadrianic jugs or the Hadrianic shards, using them for something else. It has nothing to do with the wine. Can you benefit from something else? So this next line is going to tell us. Nodot shelovdei kochavim. So if you have wineskins of Gentiles, Raman Shimon ben Gamliel Omel Mishum Rabbi Yeshua ben Kaposai Asur la'asot mehem shtichim lechamor. You can't use them as a saddle or as a blanket, depending on what interpretation you go by, for your donkey. Okay? Now, this sounds exactly like you're not using it for the wine, you're using it for the donkey. So, this is exactly the same as using it to support the bedpost. So it's you want to use it for something else, and you're benefiting. And what does it say? It's forbidden. So this goes against the one who permitted. To which they answer, and this is why it's important we read the whole braita, but then you shouldn't be allowed to sell and benefit from the kankanim. And it says in the beginning that you can, and we know that people do. People sell jugs of Gentiles to other people. So mashna nadodu, mashna kankanim. What's the difference? The wineskins and the jugs. So I'm a rabbi. He says, now I'm going to explain to you. So basically, we have to explain now the difference between the Reisha and the Seifa according to this. The Seifa is going to write, the second part is basically saying it's a problem for you to benefit from, right, the wineskins for anything, okay? And in the beginning, they say you can actually benefit from the jugs, okay? So I'm a rabbi, gzera shema yibaka nodo, v'yitlena v'yitparena al gabe nodo. It's a concern that maybe your wineskin will break. You'll have your own wineskin, not this one. It'll break. If you use the wineskin as a covering for your donkey, okay, saddle or blanket, whatever it might be, if you then, your own wineskin tears, what are you going to do? You can make a patch from the other wineskin and use it to fix yours. And that's why we can't let you keep this wineskin that has yein nesach absorbed into it, because you might end up using it for wine. And if you use it for wine, then it's going to be a problem because you now will put it in, you'll put your wine in, the flavor will come out and you'll end up drinking it. So because of that, we don't let you keep it. That's the second part. The first part, where we say you can benefit from it, is talking about jugs that are made of cheres or whatever materials they're made of, but they're not materials once they break, right? You can't fix your jug by sticking a piece from another jug into it. And sometimes people put back their jugs in broken pieces, and there is such a thing. But that's the broken pieces of its own jug. You're not going to take a jug from somewhere else and try to put it in. It's not going to work. So those you can benefit from because there's no concern that you're going to end up using them for wine and getting the flavor out in the wine. Now, Lamanda Amar. So now we basically explain, okay, so that's why really theoretically, if it wasn't a wineskin, you could use it for a saddle for your donkey. That wouldn't be a problem, and that fits with what we saw before, the opinion that permits. It's only if there's a concern, a gzera, this gzera de Rabbanan, oh, well, maybe you'll end up using it to fix your wineskin and use it as a patch. So we don't want you to keep it at all because we're worried you might do something with it. Now they say, okay, well, Lamanda Amar, we now have to explain this braita according to the other person. Lamanda Amar, well, now we have to explain if we're worried that if we don't want to allow you to keep something, right? You can't use the Hadrian's earthenware shards for supporting your bed, then why Maishna Kankanim Desharu? Then why do we permit the Kankanim, the jugs here, which are basically the same, right? Jugs that wine was in, earthenware vessels that wine was in, it's the same thing. So why now we have a problem after we explain the braita according to this one opinion, it now raises a problem in the other opinion. We're now going to talk about, and this really, it would actually have to resolve the contradiction in the Mishnah itself, which is why are the Hadrian's vessels a problem, Hadrian's shards, and these jugs are not a problem? Because Hadrian's shards were different. The whole idea was that they had a lot of wine absorbed into it. They were made from a material that was very absorbent, and they would specifically soak the wine for very long periods of time so that the wine would get in there. That's basically, it's not like your pots that have, milk absorbed in, but you don't see it at all, and it might come out when you cook the food. That's very different than actually seeing it in there, right? If you have milk in your pot and you put meat in there, that's a different story, right? The milk is actually there. These Hadrian's earthenware shards were actually real. It was like the wine was there. You could even see it, right? Imagine also it's white and then it turns red from the wine in it. You can even see it. It's really there, as opposed to these other wine skins or jugs that had, some wine absorbed in the sides that might come out, but you don't even see them. So that's the different, stages of, or the range of types of things. Okay, so we now explain this braita, both according to the one at first we thought it was difficult food, the one who permitted, and now we're going to explain according to the one who forbade. Okay, and that was all about using it for something else. But lohodulo. Now we want to get back to the braita that we quoted. This thing about, which seems strange, that Shimon ben Yehuda comes, testifies about Rabbi Gamliel, that he used to actually drink from these jugs, okay, not the Hadrian stuff, but regular jugs of wine. He would put, his own wine in there and drink from it. Forget about, benefiting, which everyone thought was okay, or everyone except Rabbi Meir, but he would even drink from it. And then the rabbis didn't agree with this testimony of Shimon ben Yehuda. Urimini, well, there's a contradictory braita. Because it says here, Yayin Abba which is the same thing we saw before in the other braita. Asur b'shia umutar b'hana'ah. You can't drink it, but you can benefit. He eats Shimon ben Yehuda. Notice, by the way, this time Yehuda is spelled with an ayin at the end, not an aleph, but it's the same name basically. He eats Shimon ben Yehuda lifnei beno shel Rabban Gamliel, in front of the son of Rabban Gamliel, Rabban Gamliel. So far, same thing. Sheshata mimenu ba'ako. Exact same testimony that Rabban Gamliel drank this in Akko, vehodulo. Now, in this case, it says the rabbis agreed with him. That's a complete contradiction. Either the rabbis agreed or the rabbis didn't agree. It's obviously very important if the rabbis agreed or disagreed, because one person's testimony against the rabbis never stands, doesn't hold. So it completely contradicts. So we're going to have two possible explanations to this. One is, my lohudulo de kamar hatam, kol siato. Well, remember, he testified in front of the son of Rabban Gamliel, but presumably also testified in front of the rabbis because it said lohodulo in plural. They didn't agree with him. So we thought that lohodulo meant nobody agreed with him, not the son and not the rabbis. Now we're going to say hodulo is actually the son agreed, but the rabbis didn't agree. Okay, and that's one way of looking at it, which is interesting because his son agreed. It must be his son must have known that his father held that way, and it's interesting the rabbis were unwilling to agree. Ibait ema guda lechud v'guda lechud, and this is why I pointed out that one was with an ayin and one was with an aleph. Some people say it was a completely different person. Now, it would be strange. Why one person would they agree with him and one person they would disagree with him? But first, let's just talk about, right, the story. What happened was 2 times. Somebody came and testified. Happens to be they had the same name, okay, same sounding name, but one had an aleph, one had an ayin. You have to remember also in the days where they didn't write this down, presumably this got written down later and the story was just passed down orally. So interesting to think that they would, ayin and aleph could easily get confused. We started our Masechet, Edehen with an aleph, Edehen with an ayin, right? And it was just a story passed down, and somebody recorded it with an aleph and someone recorded it with an ayin. But in any case, they suggest this as an answer was 2 different people. Now, why did one they agree with and one they didn't agree with? Well, presumably what happened, the first one came along and said, Rabban Gamliel did this radical thing. Nobody believed him. When the second person said, I testify, they said, oh, I guess it was really true. Now you have 2 people testifying about the same thing, because if they have the same name, right, it's 2 different people, and then they accepted it. So that's a different way to read it. I think highly unlikely, but it is a possible explanation. Now we're moving on to the next issue in the Mishnah. Orot levuvim. Okay, these are the idol worshippers. One of the things they did, they would cut out, while the animal was still alive, cut out in the hide of the animal a circle, put their hand, or I don't know, somehow put something in, cut out the heart of the animal, pull out the heart, and then offer it up to their gods. Okay, a little bit cruel sounding, or maybe a lot cruel sounding. So now what they're saying is if you see a hide of an animal, which is no longer on the animal, how they knew that it was in the area of the heart, I don't know, but you see this, area that was cut out, and you can assume it was cut out for this heart, and then you can't benefit from that hide because that hide was used, right, to basically cut out the heart, which was offered up as an offering. So Tana Rabbanan Ezu or Lavuv. So how would you identify this? Kosha karua kineged halev. It's cut opposite the heart. Vikadul, and it's round in shape. Kimina ruba, okay, like a chimney, the shape of a chimney or a window. Okay, somehow an opening that's round. Yesh alav koret dam asur. Now, besides the shape and where on the hide it's cut, but you also need it to have blood. If it has blood on it, it's asur, because the assumption is they took it out when the animal was still alive. Well, there's no way the animal's not going to bleed, so there's definitely going to be blood on the hide. Turning now to amabed, and alav koret dam. If it has no blood on it, mutal, it's permitted, because we assume maybe they cut it out, for maybe they took the heart out later. They don't offer that up to their gods, and therefore it must have happened later, and it wasn't done for Avodah Zarah purposes. Rav Huna qualifies this and says, Lo shanu ela shalom malacho. It's only if you didn't salt it. Aval malacho asul, ema malacho he'evalto. If it was already salted, which is what they would do to the hide to process it, then we can assume that the blood came off while it was processed. So if you find this hide, which has this cut out circle in the place where the heart was, and it's already processed and it has no blood on it, then you can still assume that it was used for idol worship and that the blood was removed. Okay, so either it has to have blood on it, so you need a few things. It has to be in the place where the heart was, it has to be around, and you need to have blood on it, or it's processed and has no blood. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel omer, b'zman she'akera shelo agol asur mashuch mutar. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, if the incision is round, it's forbidden. If it's long, elongated, it's permitted. Now we already we said orot levuvim, and later, by the way, my husband mentioned a cute trick, which is if you want to remember what daf this is on, it's on lamed bet, which is lave, which is the hearts. But that was a good way to remember. Talk about memorization. We'll get to that right now. So you kind of would assume it would be round, and Rav Shimon Gamliel seems to be stating the obvious, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. I'm Rav Yosef, I'm Rav Yud, I'm Rav Shmuel. So Rav Yosef passed down the name of Rav Yud and the name of Shmuel. Halakha Rav Shimon Gamliel. We pass on him that if the incision is long and not round, rectangular shape, we don't assume it came from this, and you can use it. Amar le Abaye, halakha michlal de pligi. So Abaye says, Rav Yosef, remember Rav Yosef is Abaye's rabbi. You say the halacha is like Rav Shimon Gamliel. Are you trying to say someone disagrees? Like, is there a disagreement about this? Do the rabbis disagree with Rav Shimon Gamliel? Again, we kind of assume not. Well, if not, then you don't need to say the halach is like Rav Shimon Gamliel because no one disagrees. So there's no reason to say the halach is. So he says, from the fact you're saying the halacha is, it sounds like you're saying there's a machloket. Is that what you're saying? Amar le, Rav Yosef seems a bit annoyed by his question, and he says, "My nafka lachmina. What's the difference? Who cares? I told you the halacha. The halacha is we hold like Rav Shimon Gamliel. What's the difference whether the rabbis disagree or not? Why are you bothering me about this?" Amar le, Rabbi has a good retort to this, and this we've seen a number of times already in Shas. You can see in the Masorah Shas, it's in Shabbat Kufav, Kuf Yud Gimel, Beit Kaf Daled, Eruvin Samach. Okay, it's in a lot of places. Abaye says, Gemara is a mortateh. What, you think I'm supposed to learn Gemara and just sing it like a song? Okay, some people say like a parrot, just kind of, this is what they say. It's more though, I think the issue of the song, people, see this all the time, especially kids, right? They sing songs and then you're like, do you realize what words you're saying? Do you understand what you're saying? People sing songs and they have no idea what the words are, right? We just hum the words, we sing them, we have no idea what the words mean in half the songs that we sing. Sometimes we pay attention, sometimes we know, but often we have no idea what the words are saying. He says, is that the way you want me to recite Gemara? I'm not supposed to just, going back to what I said about memorization, you're not just supposed to memorize and just quote it back. You're supposed to understand it. You're right. There's no nafkamina. It doesn't matter whether they disagree or don't disagree, but I want to understand things. And I like to understand, is there a machloket? Is there not a machloket? What's interesting about this is the sugya ends and we don't have the answer. And what's even more interesting is that the Rishonim have a debate whether the rabbis disagree or whether they don't disagree. So that's also interesting. Which, by the way, it's just nice when the Gemara starts talking about, what's the purpose of learning, right? Not just for memorization purposes, but we really want to understand what it is that we're learning. So now we have the next part of the Mishnah, which talked about if I catch an idol worshiper on their way into a house of worship, they slaughter the animal outside, they go inside into their temple, they're on their way in, and I want to buy this animal. Now, I'm not going to eat it because it's not kosher, it wasn't slaughtered, but I want to sell it, let's say. So can I buy it? So if they're on their way in, I can buy it, we learned. If they're on their way out of the house of idol worshiper with the meat, I'm not allowed to buy it. So now we're going to go through those two cases, going in and going out, and we're going to explain what Tana'itic opinion does each line accord with. Okay, each case. So Basar Nechnas Avodah Zarah Mutar, Man Tanu, who's the Tanu who holds this way? Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, de lo ki Rabbi Elazar. It's interesting, they say, who does it follow? And they tell you, well, it doesn't follow this opinion. Okay, what they really want to say is Rabbi Elazar has a unique opinion. Some people, I think, have the gear says Rabbi Elazar. But which means basically it follows the rabbi's opinion, which is the mainstream opinion, as opposed to Rabbi Eliezer or Rabbi Elazar. De'ikar Rabbi Eliezer ha'amal stam machshevet avodah kochavim la'avodah zarah. Rabbi Eliezer says that we assume that the stam machshava of an oved elilim, if there's someone, especially they're going into an idol worshiper is going into a temple with meat, you got to assume that they're going to use it, and they've already kind of designated it for idol worship, and therefore you can't benefit from it at all. Okay, meaning idol worship, we mean tikrovet, which we're going to see in a minute inside, which is something offered to the idol. It's not that the meat was an idol, it was that they were offering the meat to the idol. So, right, that's probably what you would have thought to assume. It's actually interesting. The rabbi's opinion who say, well, when they're just on their way in, we assume it wasn't yet designated in that way. Right, so Rashi says, what does it mean, stam machshevet? V'chi shachata avdal avodah zarah b'shchitato v'ne'escha. D'shchitata hi tikrovta. He says, already slaughtering it. Okay, this, by the way, matches our halachot, which is, it's going to be one of the first things we learn in, I think it might even be the first thing we learn in Masechet Zvachim, if I remember correctly, which is coming up, the first Masechet of Seder Kodshim, is about machshava when you're slaughtering the animal. And when you already think to slaughter it, if you have the wrong machshava, called pigul, it messes up the sacrifice. So this is kind of paralleling it, right? What Rabbi Elazar is saying is the Gentiles, the Gentile idol worshiper and Gentile idol worshippers do the same thing. Already when they slaughter it with the intent for their idol, and that's already problematic. But the rabbis don't think so. They think until they bring it as a tikrovet, it's not a problem. Now we move to the next opinion, the next part, which is hayotze asul mipnei shu kizivchei metim. Say when person's leaving, it's like right? We're assuming it's like zvachim that they offered to dead, which means the zvachim they offered to their idols, which is the Baal Peor from the story of Baal Peor. We're going to see it right now. And then we're going to say my time, and why when they walk out, do we treat this like it was offered up to the idols? Because we assume if they're walking out with meat, it must be that meat was offered as a tikrovet for their gods, and then they took some for themselves. The same way we bring sacrifices and then eat some of the meat, right? So same thing here. Now they say mane. Who does this accord with? Now this is not the same as the previous, because assuming this is tikrovet avodah zarah doesn't accord with any opinion. Not everybody agrees. But what they want to know is if something was a tikrovet avodah zarah, something was brought as an offering to an idol, how do we know that it's forbidden to benefit from? And for this, they're going to quote a source that doesn't exactly say that, but from this source, we can get to that. Mane, Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, this matches Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera's opinion. Again, we're trying to prove not that someone who walks out was definitely bringing the meat as a sacrifice, but it's more meat that was offered as a sacrifice to the gods, and now we can access it. Are you allowed to benefit from that? And the answer is no. How do we know that? It's Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera's opinion. Okay, now this source is Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, and he says, how do we know that something offered up to an idol has tameh status? Okay, the rabbi said Avodah Zarah becomes tameh, and not just Avodah Zarah. Things offered to Avodah Zarah carry impurity. They wanted Jews to keep away from it, so this carries impurity, and then that would also help Jews avoid, keeping away from it. Where do we get it from? Shenemal vayitzamdu lebal pa'ol v'yachluziv chemetim. Right at the end of Parsha Balak, the Jews end up worshiping the Baal Peor, and it says, and this is a pasuk in Tehillim that describes it. They clung to the Baal Peor and they ate from sacrifices of the metim, which is basically what they're saying, sacrifices offered up to the gods. But why do they call them zivchei metim? It should be zivchei elilim or something, the idols. But ma mate, they wanted to teach you ma mate mitame ba'ohel. Just like a dead person is mitame in a tent, right, carries impurity, also anything offered at tikrovet avodah zarah, it carries impurity like a dead body. In a tent, magam, masa, carrying, touching, all those. Now, this didn't talk really about benefiting, but the idea is that also, okay, once we're comparing it to a mate, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera does that comparison, we're assuming Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera takes that even farther, which is a dead body you can't benefit from at all. Okay, like I can't use it for any reason, for any benefit. So just like I can't use it, like let's say, I don't know, I need to step on it to get higher up. Like I can't use the dead body for any kind of reason. That's the same as tikrovet avodah zarah. I can't benefit from it in any way. Okay, so now we're going to say, so this was all to prove. How do we know that because right, again, once the person's coming out of the house of idol worship with the piece of meat in hand, we assume it was offered up to the idols, which means we can't benefit from it. How do we know it means we can't benefit from it? From here. Okay, again, this wasn't teaching us how do we know that we can assume that, like in the previous, right? The previous was based on this, how do we know we assume that it wasn't Avodah Zarah because we don't hold like Rabbi Elazar, we think stam machshevet avei kochel avodah zarah. We don't necessarily think that. We only think that when they're on their way out, but not when they're on their way in, they haven't gone in yet. But the assumption is that here we're trying to explain how we know it's forbidden to benefit from this kind of thing, from a tikrovet. Now we're going to end with this tarput, and we're going to add something the Mishnah didn't talk about. So the Mishnah talked about going to tarput, which there's different interpretations whether tarput, it seems to be a festival, okay, but it could be, it's just a house of worship, okay? Let's go with really there was a festival. So halchim le tarput, I'm going back to Kaftet Amud. Halchim le tarput asur lasef latedim ahem. V'habaim mutalim. The Mishnah talked about an idol worshiper going into this festival and going out of the festival, just like we had a minute ago, food going in, food going out. Here it's going to be the reverse. I can't do business with an idol worshiper going in because, again, it brings us back to the beginning of the Masechet. We're assuming if I do business with them and then they go in to this festival where they're worshiping idols at the festival, they're going to thank their idols. Once they're walking out, they're leaving. I'm not worried that they're going to go thank their idols. They're done already with the festival, with celebrating. So that's what we're going to see right now. Halchim letarput asurim lasefer latedim hem. Amar Shmuel ovei kochavim haolech letarput. So Shmuel is going to explain all this. Okay, the Mishnah didn't really say why. It just said it's forbidden, right, when they're going in, and it's permitted when they're going out. So Shmuel explains exactly as I did, because I explained based on Shmuel. If they're going in this idol worship or the tarput while they're going in, it's forbidden. Because they're going to go and thank their gods. When they're leaving, it's permitted. They're done. Okay, what was, and they're finished, and now they're going home. So there's no concern they're going to go thank their idols. However, now here Shmuel adds something else though, which wasn't mentioned in the Mishnah. What if you have a Jew going into a house of idol, to this festival, okay, or a house of idol worship? So Yisrael, we have a Jew going to this festival. Okay, we're going to have the exact opposite. A Jew on their way in, we're allowed to do business dealings with them because hopefully, okay, this is the optimistic attitude. We're hoping the Jew will change their mind and they won't actually decide to stay there and worship the idols. So while they're on their way in, they're just kind of, sometimes you like to just see what's going on and see the vibe, but you're not really necessarily going there to pray for the idols. And therefore, if you see a Jew going in, you can assume they're not going to necessarily worship the idols. You can do business with them on the way in. But chazara asur, but when they leave, it's forbidden. Why? It's actually the opposite of the Gentile, because the Gentile idol worshiper who did their thing at the festival now is going home. There's no concern they're going to go back there. But the Jew, this is kind of like a new thing for them. And if they stayed and ended up being part of things there, when they leave and then they walk out, they're on a high, they just have this great experience in this high, this festival of idol worship. And then they get a business deal right after. First of all, you could say, oh, they think, oh, maybe this is connected. And they'll be so excited about the new thing that they're now clinging to, they'll go back inside and they'll say, oh, let me go thank the idol. So with a Jew, there's more of a concern, although we're going to talk about this. What about going in? Maybe it should also be a concern. We're going to have a source that seems to contradict, and we'll talk about this more tomorrow. So what have we done today? At the end of our daf, we started with a vinegar made from vinegar beer, and sometimes it has wine in it, sometimes it doesn't. These the wine yeast. Then we talked about what is this cheres Hadriani, and then we learned about what it is. And we wanted to know, can you benefit from it not by the wine in it, but can you benefit by using it to stabilize your bed? From there, we got to some other source, right? A braita that contradicted one of the opinions that we saw was a machloket. We had a braita to contradict the one who permitted. From there, we got into, then we had to explain the braita in and of itself that made some distinction and resolved the contradiction. Then we had to explain the braita according to the other opinion. And then we said there's a contradiction, hodulo, lo hodulo, and how we resolve that in two different ways. From there, we moved on to the Arol of Uvim and described all the what needs to happen in order to say this hide with the hole in it is definitely taken from, this was definitely because an idol worshiper cut this hole out and took it out. We had the conversation with Rav Yosef and Rabbi, Paskin, like, what does anyone disagree really? And what, and then Rav Yosef, why are you asking me? And we had that whole thing about memorization without understanding. And then we ended with these two cases of the meat going in and out and the person going in and out. And can you do business dealings with them? And is the meat forbidden or permitted? And whose opinion does that go by? With that, we finished for today. And we added, just to point out, we added about this tarput, this festival, the difference between a Jew going in and an idol worshiper going in. And we'll continue to talk about this difference in tomorrow's class and develop it a little bit more. Wishing everyone a good day and reminding you about registering for bookmarks and to read Shulu's article about the cheres Hadriani, which is very interesting, and also about the two upcoming shiurim in America, in California, New York. And the Zoom will be off for the month, although the shiurim will go up as usual, starting Friday until around August 25th. We'll get started up again with the Zoom. But shiurim will be up as usual. And with that, wishing everyone a good day, and may this be a week that brings good news.